Hey, this is Russell B. I'm getting ready to go get some shirts or a shirt or whatever for an interview that I'm doing. I need a shirt that is a solid color, and instead all I have are these things right here. So I gotta go get a shirt. So I'm gonna film a little bit of that process, hopefully make it kind of interesting, but that's gonna be at least part of my day today. So stay tuned and see you in a bit. Like I said, I'm on my way to get a t-shirt for an interview I got coming up related to the opioid crisis. So now I can talk. Yeah, so I'm doing an interview on Wednesday. Today's Monday. And it's an interview that's going to be conducted by my screenwriting instructor. She's doing a documentary on the opioid crisis. And that's something that's near and dear to my heart because my brother Colin, he passed away 10 years ago this year of a morphine overdose. Morphine intoxication was his official cause of death. So that is something that's near and dear to my heart. And I haven't really dealt with his death or anything. I haven't truly grieved over it. The thing about his death is that it didn't happen in a vacuum, which of course no death does, but it didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened while I was coming off psych meds. And that made his death so much more difficult to take that it was just unreal. You know, when you're coming off meds, everything is difficult. But when you're coming off meds and you lose, the person who's really, no offense to anybody else, but he was the most important person to me. He was my brother, he was my best friend, oftentimes my only friend. He was kind of like a parent because our parents divorced when I was 7 and he was 13, and things were rough for a while, and we were very close because of that, even though he went to live with my dad and I stayed with my mom. We were very close, and losing him, I was about a year into my coming off meds journey. So I was kind of pretty much at the beginning for me. So I didn't even go to his funeral because I was coming off my meds and I wasn't able to sleep or do anything. And I just was barely able to hold it together. His funeral was back home about 300 miles away from where I was living at the time. And I couldn't make the trip. I thought if I make this trip, it might be the end of me. I was too destabilized from coming off medications, so I couldn't make the trip. And at that time too, I moved because things were getting kind of bad where I was. And because of that move, I am a diagnosed schizophrenic. And because of that, I had stopped seeing my psychiatrist who I'd been seeing for the last, I don't know how many years prior to that, maybe 10 years, I can't remember off the top of my head, especially while driving. But prior to that, I'd been seeing him. So it didn't matter if I had a schizophrenia diagnosis or not. He was the one who diagnosed me. But after I left his practice, because of my schizophrenia diagnosis, most psychiatrists would not see me. Once they hear the diagnosis, they're just like, oh, I don't see schizophrenics. They recommend that I go to the mental health center. And that's, to me, is not the best place to go. The psychiatrists there are overworked. They see the worst of the worst in terms of, expected outcomes and so on and so forth. And I knew that if I went to a mental health center, I would not get the help that I was looking for. That was just my belief. So I had to deal with doctors telling me that, no, you're just, like I tried to see somebody who would combine psychotherapy with handling the medications and stuff. And they were like, no, schizophrenics don't do well with introspective therapy. And that was their response to my inquiry, you know, about, oh, would I be able to see you? I'm like, no, sorry, boss. Y'all don't do very well with talk therapy. It's kind of how she was putting it. So that was nice. I didn't feel dismissed at all. So that's what I had to deal with, and that might be what other people are having to deal with. And I'm getting into another topic here. But schizophrenia has that effect. Again, my symptoms are only the negative symptoms. So even as a schizophrenic, I feel like I'm kind of an outlier. You know, I didn't have the classic symptoms. And as I said in a previous video, as far as I'm concerned, all the negative symptoms can be caused by just being over-medicated, you know. And I was already on the meds before I got the diagnosis. But I feel like schizophrenics need all the representation they can get, you know, those labeled as schizophrenics. They need all the representation they can get. And doctors, as these things tend to go, I think doctors, the actual professionals, the psychiatrists, they're the ones who often seem to, in my experience, stigmatize their patients. It's not regular folk, but to me, that was my experience, that it's the professionals who do the most stigmatizing. But this is why, you know, I'm getting into this stuff because my brother's death didn't happen in a vacuum. And I'm worried in the interview that it will seem like it did. But it absolutely didn't. And there were so many other things that I was dealing with and processing, and things that kept me from grieving his death. And, you know, at that same time, not being able to find a doctor who would see me. I went to a doctor and they just immediately said, because I was coming off all my medications. I moved to a new area, was trying to find a doctor while coming off all of my meds. So knowing that I was coming off all my meds, I actually stopped some of my medications well before I intended to do that, because I knew that I could not go to a new doctor with 4 medications or whatever I was taking at that time that I was trying to come off of, or still in the process of discontinuing, you know, of tapering. I'm like, okay, 4 medications would be way too many. Plus I was taking insulin and all that stuff. 4 medications would be way too many, so I need to go in there with only 2 medications. You know what I mean? That looks better. And I think the 2 were Klonopin and I want to say Lexapro at that point. So my benzo and my antidepressant. So, you know, that was my calculation, and I think it was a good one to make, but it sucked for me because I had to come off more, you know, I had to come off some of the meds too quickly. So all of these things were happening simultaneously. So you may be experiencing the same thing. I've met other people who've suffered losses while they were coming off meds, and it was always devastating. And it can potentially lock you into this grief cycle that never completes, in as much as a grief cycle can complete. And you're also grieving all these other things. You're grieving the loss of a lot of things when you come off meds. And just in general in life, I think we're all grieving a lot of things. We're all experiencing a lot of grief cycles that just cannot go through to completion. So yeah, that's where we're going. So this was a video about getting a shirt, among other things, but for all I know, I don't know, for knowing me, I'll just wrap it up here in editing.